Picture yourself at 12 years old. The sun beats down on the parched hills where you're guiding a small herd of goats, dust rising with every step. Life is harsh but simple, until the village elder approaches your father with an offer that seems impossible to refuse. What follows is not a promise of learning, nor the start of a noble apprenticeship. Instead, it marks the beginning of something far darker. For centuries across Central Asia, behind closed doors and whispered conversations, a practice has endured that embodies one of the greatest contradictions of human society. In places where the law demands death for same-sex intimacy, a parallel system has thrived in plain sight, a system where beauty in a boy is not a blessing but a curse. This practice, often translated as boy play, is not folklore or rumor. It is a carefully structured trade that has haunted generations. The stories you are about to hear come from survivors who escaped, from journalists who risked their lives to investigate, and from historians who traced its long and bloody legacy. What emerges is not a tale of isolated corruption or cultural misunderstanding. It is a machine designed to convert innocence into entertainment and children into commodities. The boys trapped within this machine face choices no child should ever make: obey or be broken, perform or suffer. Many never fully recover from the damage inflicted in these years. Their childhoods are not simply stolen, they are methodically dismantled until nothing recognizable remains. The process of recruitment begins not in palaces or cities, but in the poorest villages where survival is already uncertain. Local strongmen, commanders, traders, or political figures scour these communities with practiced eyes. They are not searching for sons to educate or apprentices to train, they are hunting, and they know exactly what they want. The boys chosen usually fall between 10 and 18 years of age. Delicate features, light skin, or the ability to move gracefully make them prime targets. In this world, beauty becomes a weapon turned against the very children who possess it. The methods of acquiring them are deliberate, never accidental. A father in debt is pressured to surrender his son as payment. A widow struggling to feed her family is promised relief in exchange for her child. Sometimes a family is offered a lump sum enough to buy grain and survive another winter. In other cases, threats make refusal impossible. What appears to be charity is, in reality, the opening step of enslavement. Once selected, the boys are taken away from everything they know. Their old clothes are stripped from them. In their place come silk tunics, bright scarves, rings, and kohl for their eyes. They are renamed, sometimes given feminine titles meant to erase their identity. They are taught to dance, to sing, to smile, but the performance is only the surface. Behind the music lies the true demand. These children are expected not just to entertain, but to submit. Private gatherings of powerful men hidden inside fortified compounds become their stage. At first, they whirl to traditional rhythms, their bodies decorated with bells and colored fabrics. The laughter of the men fills the room, the smell of hashish and strong tea thickens the air. Bets are placed on who dances best, but when the music stops, the real horror begins. One by one, the boys are taken away to locked rooms. There, the nights stretch into unspeakable ordeals as they are forced to endure what no child should ever face. Their bodies become currency in a marketplace where their owners climb higher in status by displaying them like trophies. This is not random depravity, it is organized, maintained, and normalized. Networks of wealthy men compete for the most beautiful boys. Ownership becomes a symbol of rank. Sharing them at parties is considered generosity. A single child can be sold for sums ranging from several hundred to thousands of dollars. Small fortunes in communities where most families own almost nothing. For the boys, life becomes a cycle of fear and degradation. They sleep in cramped quarters, sometimes locked inside to prevent escape. Their meals are meager, their punishments brutal. Any sign of rebellion is crushed with beatings, starvation, or humiliation. And yet, the manipulation is not only physical. From the very beginning, these children are told they are chosen, privileged, even honored to serve. They are instructed to smile, to dance, to appear grateful. They learn to perform joy while enduring torment. Some become so skilled at this performance that even they begin to lose track of the difference between survival and surrender. The contradiction at the heart of this system is staggering. In public, strict religious law condemns homosexuality as a crime deserving death. In private, many of the same commanders who enforce these punishments maintain their own collections of dancing boys. The hypocrisy is not hidden, it is woven into the fabric of authority itself. To question it openly is to risk exile or worse. For the boys, escape rarely brings salvation. Those who run away or are eventually released find themselves cast adrift. They return to their villages only to be met with shame. Families who once mourned their absence often reject them outright, unwilling to bear the stigma. They are seen not as victims, but as tainted, unworthy. And so, many drift into the shadows of the cities. With no education, no trade, and no family support, they survive through petty crime, drug use, or prostitution. Some repeat the cycle by becoming exploiters themselves, turning the very skills they were forced to learn into a way to exert control over new victims. This, then, is the opening to a story that is not ancient history. It is ongoing, fueled by profit, power, and silence. A world where children are paraded like possessions, their lives extinguished long before their bodies give out. What you are about to uncover in the next chapters will reveal not only the depths of this practice, but also how deeply it entangles entire societies, from local commanders to international powers who look the other way. Because this is not just a story about boys forced to dance. It is about how human beings can twist tradition, wealth, and authority into tools of systematic destruction. The system does not survive by secrecy alone. It thrives because it has been normalized, turned into ritual, even wrapped in the language of tradition. To the outsider, it looks like unspeakable cruelty. But to those inside, it has long been presented as an open secret, a tolerated shadow of society. Wealthy patrons, known for maintaining these boys, often gather in walled estates or fortified compounds. Within these spaces, the rules of morality bend, and appearances matter more than truth. The men sit on carpets, drink bitter tea, or pass around pipes of hashish while waiting for the show to begin. The air is thick with smoke, laughter, and the jingle of bells. Then the boys are led in. They are dressed in vivid silks, their hair grown long and carefully styled. Kohl darkens their eyes, rouge stains their cheeks, and jewelry sparkles at their wrists. To the untrained eye, they could almost pass for young girls, which is precisely the point. Every gesture, every sway of the hips has been drilled into them. Each dance is designed not simply for beauty, but for provocation. And the audience does not hide its hunger. They cheer, whistle, and toss money onto the carpets, competing to show favor for the boy who performs best. For the children, this attention brings no pride. It is only the first stage of the night. They know too well what comes next. As the performances end, the laughter shifts. Men call out names, bets are settled, and the boys are divided. Some are sent away immediately, chosen by their patrons for private rooms. Others remain behind, forced to serve food, pour drinks, and await their turn. When the doors close, the silence in those rooms is filled with acts too brutal to describe in full. The economic machine behind this practice ensures its continuation. A single boy can fetch anywhere from the price of a family's yearly harvest to sums equivalent to a small fortune. The most prized, those with rare beauty or exceptional skill, become living investments. Patrons train them, buy them costumes, even hire instructors to teach them new dances. Like horses in a stable or merchandise in a shop, they are treated as assets that must be maintained to preserve value. The boys, meanwhile, live in fear. Many are locked in small rooms between performances, denied food if they displease their masters. They are often beaten for mistakes, starved for disobedience, or humiliated to break their will. Chains or bolts on doors prevent escape. Some attempt it anyway, and the punishment is swift, public beatings meant to terrify the others into submission. The psychological control is just as suffocating. From the first day, the boys are told they are special, chosen, and privileged to serve powerful men. They are isolated from their families, stripped of old names, forbidden to write letters or send messages. Any link to their past life is severed. Over time, many lose even the memory of who they were before. The paradox is sharp. These children are forced to perform joy. They must smile while dancing, laugh when spoken to, and pretend to be grateful. They become experts at reading their abusers, learning how to act in ways that minimize violence. But this skill comes at a terrible cost. As adults, many survivors say they can no longer separate genuine emotions from the masks they were forced to wear. Behind all this lies a cultural hypocrisy, almost too vast to believe. Religious law in the region condemns homosexuality with the harshest of penalties. Leaders denounce it in public sermons, judges sentence men to death for same-sex intimacy, and yet, many of the very commanders who enforce these punishments keep their own private harems of dancing boys. They justify this contradiction with twisted logic that the boys, dressed as women, are not truly male in those moments. It is a lie, but one convenient enough to let the practice flourish. The contradiction goes deeper still. Even in territories ruled by strict religious factions, the abuse does not vanish. Instead, it moves underground. Secret parties replace public ones, and boys are hidden away rather than paraded openly. The demand never disappears, because the network of wealth, power, and silence is too deeply entrenched. For the children caught inside, the nightmare is unending. Day by day, they are drained of childhood, of dignity, of hope. Nights bring bruises and scars. Mornings bring rehearsals and fresh performances. Their world becomes a cycle of fear disguised as ceremony, abuse wrapped in jewels. And yet this is not the end of the story, because the consequences do not vanish when the boy grows too old to attract attention. Instead, they ripple outward, destroying entire lives, families, and futures. When a boy reaches 18 or so, he is often cast aside. No longer considered attractive, he loses the status of being prized, and instead becomes disposable. Some are given a little money and pushed into the streets. Others are simply abandoned with nothing but the scars they carry. For those who try to return home, rejection is common. Villages whisper. Families, once tricked or coerced into giving up their sons, now turn them away out of shame. The boy who once danced in silks is treated as damaged goods, unwanted even by the people who once mourned him. With no education, no trade, and no support, many sink into poverty. They sleep under bridges, join gangs, or fall into drug addiction. Opium becomes a common escape, numbing the memories that never leave. Others turn to prostitution, the only life they know, repeating the very acts that once destroyed them. Some, most tragically, become exploiters themselves. Having been raised in a world where abuse is normalized, they see it as natural. They recruit boys of their own, perpetuating the cycle. What was done to them becomes what they do to others. In this way, the system renews itself, fed by silence, shame, and the absence of accountability. The practice has proven resilient even in the face of attempted crackdowns. During certain regimes, punishments were carried out publicly, men accused of keeping boys executed in town squares. Yet the practice never disappeared. It merely retreated, hiding until the pressure lifted, then re-emerging stronger than before. Even international forces could not eradicate it. Soldiers from abroad reported seeing it firsthand among the very commanders they were allied with. But politics and strategy demanded silence. These men were essential partners in war, and so their crimes were overlooked. In some cases, foreign contractors and soldiers even participated themselves, deepening the betrayal for the victims who thought the outside world might bring protection. The boys saw it all. They watched as those meant to enforce justice looked away, as those meant to protect sometimes joined in. Each betrayal added another wound, another confirmation that no one would come to save them. This is the cruelty of the system. It survives, not because it is hidden, but because too many choose not to see. And as we move forward, the story only grows darker. Because beyond the broken childhoods, beyond the ruined lives, lies a truth about power itself. When authority is allowed to twist morality for its own desires, entire societies can become complicit in the destruction of their most vulnerable. The cruelty of this practice is not confined to bruises or scars. Its deepest wounds are carved into the mind. Survivors describe how they learned to split themselves in two, the body enduring one reality, the mind escaping into another. They call it survival, but psychologists later call it dissociation. From the very first performance, the boys are trained not just to dance, but to conceal. Conceal fear behind a smile, conceal despair behind graceful gestures, conceal trauma behind eyes painted to shimmer in candlelight. They learn that hesitation invites punishment, that tears earn beatings, that silence can be safer than words. This double life becomes second nature. Outwardly, they appear cheerful, playful, even grateful. Inwardly, they are torn apart. By the time they reach adulthood, many cannot tell the difference between genuine emotion and performance. They find themselves smiling in moments of grief, laughing when they feel nothing, apologizing when no apology is needed. It is as if the mask fused with their face. Therapists who have worked with survivors say the damage runs deeper than ordinary trauma. These children were forced to act as though they consented to what destroyed them. That contradiction creates a wound that never fully closes. Imagine being forced to say thank you while you are being harmed. The words themselves become poisoned, and trust both in others and in oneself dies quietly inside. The physical toll is just as devastating. Years of repeated assault leave permanent damage to the body. Survivors speak of internal injuries that never healed, of chronic pain that shadows them into adulthood, many contract infections that are left untreated in a society that denies even the vocabulary to describe what happened to them. Some diseases linger silently for years. Others spread rapidly among boys kept in close quarters, unexamined, uncared for. The toll of malnutrition compounds the suffering. Outside their performances, boys are often fed little more than scraps, their bodies kept lean for appearance. Bones grow brittle, skin thins, muscles weaken. Add to this the endless cycle of stress and exhaustion, and the body begins to break down long before the boy becomes a man. Then there are the addictions. For many, drugs become the only escape. Patrons sometimes introduce narcotics deliberately, making the boys more pliant, more dependent, easier to control. Later, when they are cast out, those addictions remain, pushing them deeper into poverty and despair. Opium dens in the cities fill with former dancing boys who sought refuge from memories they cannot silence. Even for those who escape drugs, the scars of the mind remain. Nightmares wake them, flashbacks interrupt their days, panic attacks send them spiraling. Some survivors describe a sensation of leaving their bodies whenever intimacy is attempted in adult relationships. Others admit they can no longer feel intimacy at all. What was forced upon them in childhood reshaped the very wiring of their brains. And yet, amid the horror, there are details that reveal just how systematic the exploitation island. Wealthy patrons often keep records of their boys' ledgers detailing ages, skills, costumes, and performances. These records look less like secrets and more like business accounts. The boys are treated not as children but as investments, managed with the same attention as livestock or merchandise. The gatherings where they perform follow unwritten rules. Guests know when to clap, when to wager, when to request a particular dancer. There are hierarchies among the patrons, with the wealthiest displaying the most beautiful boys, just as they might display rare horses or ornate weapons. Sharing a prized boy at a gathering raises status, while refusing to share lowers it. Abuse becomes currency, and the children are the coin. The normalization of this system is perhaps the most chilling aspect. When abuse is hidden, at least there is the possibility of shame. But here, it is paraded, wagered upon, even celebrated. Children are dressed in jewels and called special, while behind the facade, their childhoods are extinguished. The hypocrisy of power ensures its survival. Commanders who order public executions for adultery or same-sex relations preside over these parties in private. Politicians who thunder about morality from podiums smile as boys dance before them. Businessmen who donate to religious charities boast in hushed circles about the beauty of the children they own. When international observers enter the picture, the betrayal deepens. Reports from soldiers, aid workers, and contractors describe seeing the practice firsthand. Some tried to intervene, only to be told by superiors to remain silent. Others joined in, hiding behind their uniforms and badges of authority. The message to the boys was clear. The world knew, and still the world did nothing. For a child forced into this life, hope becomes a dangerous luxury. Each day is survived, not lived. Each night brings fear, not rest. Some cling to memories of their families, whispering their mothers' names before sleep. Others erase those memories entirely, convincing themselves they were chosen, that this is who they are meant to be. It is easier than facing the truth. And yet, a few do escape. They slip away during errands, or flee when their patron is distracted. Some find their way across borders, telling their stories to journalists or investigators. These testimonies are rare, but they are the only reason the world knows the scale of what happens. Without them, the silence would remain complete. Their stories reveal a devastating pattern. The system does not only steal childhood, it rewrites identity. Survivors describe feeling as though they no longer belong anywhere. Not in their villages, where shame and stigma await. Not in the cities, where poverty and crime consume them. Not in the outside world, which treats them as exotic tragedies rather than human beings. This sense of exile of being human yet unwanted may be the cruelest legacy of all. A boy survives the beatings, the assaults, the hunger, only to find that survival offers no place to belong. His past condemns him, his present consumes him, and his future vanishes before it begins. The cycle continues because every element reinforces the next. Poverty makes families vulnerable, power makes commanders untouchable, culture makes silence mandatory, and profit makes exploitation irresistible. Until all four are broken, the machine grinds on, feeding itself with the lives of children who never had a chance to choose. And so, the story of these boys is not simply a tale of hidden abuse. It is a mirror reflecting how power, hypocrisy, and silence can combine to destroy innocence, while convincing a society to look the other way. But there is more to uncover, because beyond the villages, beyond the parties, beyond even the survivors, lies a larger truth. This system did not only survive because of local silence, it survived because powerful global players allowed it to. In the next chapter, we will look at how politics, war, and international interests created conditions where this exploitation not only continued, but, in some cases, expanded under the eyes of the world. When foreign armies entered the region, many believed the presence of outsiders would bring accountability. Soldiers with cameras, aid workers with reports, journalists with questions all seemed to offer the possibility that silence would finally be broken. But for the boys trapped inside this system, those hopes were betrayed. International forces soon discovered what had long been common knowledge. Boys dressed in silks, made to dance before commanders. Children escorted into compounds at dusk and locked behind gates until dawn. The evidence was too widespread to ignore. Yet, instead of dismantling the practice, many foreign officials were told to turn away. Why? Because the men responsible were not merely criminals, they were allies. Local commanders who controlled armed militias, police chiefs who enforced fragile security, businessmen who financed military campaigns. To challenge them risked destabilizing an already fragile balance. And so, boys continued to suffer while foreign powers shook hands with their captors. Reports surfaced of soldiers witnessing the abuse, hearing screams from locked rooms, even seeing children chained. Some filed complaints. Yet the responses they received were chillingly uniform. These are cultural matters, leave them alone. Human rights, it seemed, ended where military necessity began. Worse still, some foreign contractors and soldiers crossed the line from silent witnesses to active participants. Survivors spoke of men with foreign accents joining the gatherings, sitting among local patrons, applauding the dances, and taking boys into private rooms. These were men who came under banners of liberation and protection, but who instead deepened the betrayal. For a child forced into this world, seeing those who claimed to represent justice become customers only confirmed that justice did not exist. This complicity reveals something larger than local corruption. It shows how power at every level, village, region, nation, and even international, aligned to protect exploitation when it threatened convenience. The cost was always paid by the most vulnerable. Meanwhile, official condemnations rang out from podiums and press conferences. Leaders denounced abuse, promised investigations, declared zero tolerance. But in the compounds, the music never stopped. The boys still danced, the patrons still laughed, and the cycle still turned. Words were plentiful, action was absent. The psychological damage of this betrayal is difficult to measure. Survivors describe not only the trauma of abuse, but the crushing realization that the world knew and did nothing. Some say this realization hurt more than the assaults themselves. Pain fades, betrayal does not. For many, the impact extended beyond childhood into adult life. Survivors struggle with relationships, unable to trust even those who show them kindness. They fear intimacy, confuse violence with affection, and mistake silence for safety. In societies where mental health support is almost non-existent, they carry these wounds alone, often numbing themselves with drugs or descending into crime. Medical consequences compound the suffering. Survivors suffer long-term injuries, chronic pain, untreated infections, permanent damage from repeated assaults. Some contract diseases that, untreated, shorten their lives dramatically. For those who survive into adulthood, health remains a daily battle, a reminder of what was stolen from them. The cycle of rejection never loosens. When boys try to return to their families, stigma slams the door shut. Parents, terrified of gossip and humiliation, refuse to take them back. Communities whisper about shame, about dishonor, about corruption. Rarely do they whisper about survival. And so, abandoned, these boys drift. Some end up in sprawling slums, nameless in a sea of poverty. Others gather in small groups, surviving on theft, on smuggling, on selling what little is left of themselves. The streets of major cities hide countless former dancing boys whose lives were discarded once they outlived their usefulness. Among them are the most tragic cases those who become perpetrators. Raised without education, taught from childhood that power means possession, they repeat the cycle. They take boys of their own, convinced that what was done to them is simply the way of the world. Their innocence stolen, their morality warped, they become the next generation of exploiters. This continuation ensures the system's survival. Each victim who becomes an abuser proves how effective the conditioning was. Abuse transforms into tradition, suffering into inheritance. And unless something breaks the chain, it stretches endlessly into the future. Attempts to eradicate the practice often crumble under the weight of hypocrisy. Certain rulers staged executions of men caught with boys, parading their moral authority. But these displays were as much theatre as punishment. Behind closed doors, the same rulers indulged in the very acts they condemned. The message was clear: power decides who may exploit and who must be punished. Even when outsiders pressed harder, when journalists published exposés, when investigators revealed the scale, little changed. Officials denied, deflected, or blamed poverty. Some claimed the reports were exaggerations, slander designed to damage reputation. Others quietly admitted the truth, but shrugged, saying there were bigger problems to solve. And yet, the bigger problem was right here: a society willing to sacrifice its children to preserve its hierarchies. It is tempting to see this practice as unique to one region, a stain confined to one culture, but the deeper truth is far more unsettling. The mechanics of exploitation, poverty creating vulnerability, power demanding submission, silence, enabling abuse, exist everywhere. What differs are the costumes, the rituals, the justifications. Here, it is boys forced to dance in silks. Elsewhere, it may be different victims, different disguises. But the machinery is the same: power feeding on the powerless, tradition disguising cruelty, silence ensuring survival. And so, the story of these boys is not only a dark history of one place, it is a warning of what happens when authority is allowed to twist morality into weapon, when culture is used as a shield for exploitation, and when the suffering of the weak is deemed an acceptable price for the comfort of the strong. The final chapter of this story will return to the survivors themselves, to their voices, their memories, their struggles to reclaim humanity from a world that denied it. Because if there is any light in this darkness, it lies not in the words of officials or the excuses of leaders, but in the endurance of those who lived through the unendurable. If there is any hope to be found in this story, it comes from the survivors themselves. Their voices, trembling yet unbroken, pierce through centuries of silence. They are men now, but within them still live the frightened boys who once danced in silks for the amusement of others. They speak of nights that seemed endless, of bruises that never faded, of music that became unbearable because it carried memories of captivity. Some recall the taste of hashish smoke filling banquet halls, the sound of coins clinking on carpets, the heavy footsteps of men who came to claim them. Others remember the smaller things: the bell tied around their ankle, the sting of coal in their eyes, the way their own names disappeared as if they had never existed. One survivor, interviewed years later, said he no longer recognized his reflection in the mirror. His face, hardened by age and addiction, seemed to belong to someone else. "They taught me to smile when I wanted to scream," he said, "and now I don't know the difference." Another described the cruel irony of survival. He escaped his patron, crossed borders, and found refuge abroad, but peace eluded him. Every night, he woke drenched in sweat, convinced he was still locked in those rooms, in his new country. People called him brave, but he felt only hollow. "I left the walls," he explained, "but the walls never left me." For many, the stigma lingers as fiercely as the trauma. Returning home means rejection. Communities whisper that the boys are tainted, dishonored, beyond redemption. Families, fearing shame, turn away their own sons. Survivors carry this rejection like a second captivity, freed from their masters, but never free from society's judgment. The absence of mental health care deepens the wound. In a world where speaking of trauma is taboo, where even acknowledging abuse is dangerous, survivors are left alone with their pain. Some turn to drugs to numb the memories. Others drift into crime, living lives marked by desperation. Too many end their stories in unmarked graves, remembered by no one, their childhoods consumed by a system that outlived them. And yet, not all is silence. In rare moments, survivors have stood up and told the world what was done to them. Their testimonies became the backbone of investigations, the evidence that no denial could erase. Each word carried enormous risk, yet they spoke anyway, demanding recognition not only for themselves, but for the countless others who never escaped. Their courage forces us to face a truth we might prefer to ignore. Exploitation does not survive in darkness alone, it survives because we look away. Because we accept excuses, because we prioritize convenience, because we allow culture or tradition to disguise cruelty. The boys were not destroyed in isolation, they were destroyed under the gaze of men who had the power to stop it and chose not to. The lesson stretches beyond any single country or custom. The structure of abuse, wealth, and power, preying on poverty and vulnerability, exists everywhere. The forms differ, but the result is the same. Children robbed of innocence, lives rewritten by violence. What makes this story uniquely chilling is not only the scale of the suffering, but the way it was normalized. When abuse is hidden, at least shame remains. Here, it was paraded, wagered upon, celebrated. It became a ritual so entrenched that even its victims sometimes believed they were chosen. That is how power sustains itself, by convincing the powerless that their suffering is destiny. And so, the survivors' voices matter. They break the illusion. They remind us that behind every tradition, every justification, every ritual, there is a child whose humanity cannot be erased by silks or jewels. They remind us that silence is complicity, that looking away is a choice, and that cruelty survives only when allowed to. The boys who once danced are now men scarred by their pasts. Some fight to rebuild their lives, carving out fragile paths of dignity. Others remain trapped in cycles of poverty and addiction. Too many did not survive long enough to tell their stories. But those who did ask us for something simple, not pity, not charity, but recognition. Recognition that what was done to them was not inevitable, not excusable, not forgivable. Their suffering is a mirror held up to all of us. It shows what happens when the vulnerable are abandoned, when power is unchecked, when tradition is used as a mask for cruelty. It forces us to confront the truth that exploitation is not a distant relic of history, but a living system that adapts and survives wherever silence protects it. And so, to speak of these boys is not merely to recount a dark chapter of one region. It is to acknowledge a universal danger that beauty can be turned into a curse, that childhood can be stolen in the name of pleasure, that societies can accept the destruction of their own children as if it were inevitable. The story closes here, but the reality does not. Somewhere, behind closed doors, the music still plays. The bells still jingle, the boys still dance. Their smiles still mask their screams. The only question that remains is whether we will continue to look away, or whether we will finally listen to the voices that survived. Because every boy forced to dance is not only a victim of his own captors, he is a victim of every silence, every excuse, every compromise that allowed the cycle to continue. And if history teaches us anything, it is this: silence is the accomplice of cruelty. To break one, we must destroy the other.